Kyrie Irving dominates another day in the NBA news cycle, opting into his $37 million contract for next season. Does that dash the Phoenix Suns' hopes of getting Kevin Durant, plus more trades and free agent targets? We're previewing free agency part 2 here on Locked On Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen here as we make our way through an already hectic and crazy free agent week in the NBA, headed toward Thursday at 3 p.m. when all of the craziness really legitimately begins. If you're finding us in your favorite podcast app, go ahead and hit follow or subscribe to make sure that I'm in your feed every single morning. And if you're finding us on YouTube, that's the best way to support the show. So go ahead and hit subscribe down below and leave me a comment telling me if you think that Kyrie opting in ends the Suns' chances at getting Kevin Durant, or if maybe those things are completely unrelated. I want to dive right into that. We'll get to Jay Crowder and Landry Shamet trades. We'll get into free agent big men that the Suns could sign if they do move on from Deandre Ayton. But everything in the NBA right now starts and ends with the Brooklyn Nets. Starting Monday morning, you have Adrian Wojnarowski. Well, really, you have Christian Winfield before anybody of the New York Daily News reporting that the Nets have given Kyrie Irving permission to negotiate sign-in trades, that Kevin Durant would then explore leaving. He still hasn't talked to the Nets, all this stuff. It feels like, okay, it's happening. Kyrie's going to leave, and here we're going. We're off to the races. But then you have actually, there's not a but yet. There were several dominoes that fell when it still felt like the Nets were going to crumble in front of our very eyes. The next one was Brian Windhorst, also of ESPN, reporting that the Nets were willing to lose out on Kevin Durant if and when Kyrie Irving left. He described it as a staring contest. Stare down, maybe was what he said. Both teams just waiting for the other to blink. Both sides waiting for the other to blink. The odds on betting websites on late Monday afternoon started to go toward Deandre Ayton to the Nets. So it felt like everything was happening. It felt like Kyrie was going to leave, whether it was opting out to go to the Lakers or whether it was finding a sign and trade. It felt like Kevin Durant would then consider leaving and that the Suns were going to be the number one candidate to swoop in and make that trade happen. Then we hear, I don't even know, around 3, 4, 5 p.m. Phoenix time that Kyrie Irving has reportedly chosen to opt in to that $37 million deal per Shams Charania. But here's why I don't think this is over. Even despite all of that craziness, ending with Kyrie seeming to settle on making a bunch of money, which makes a bunch of sense to me, I don't think it's over for a few reasons. One is Kyrie Irving can still be traded. So opting in just means that he's going to, this upcoming season, that will be his contract. It'll be the final expiring year of the deal he signed with Brooklyn originally, and it'll be worth, I think, $36.9 million. That's all that opting in does for him. He can still be traded, and because now he won't be opting out, which would have meant, in all likelihood, a sign-and trade of some sort, teams don't have to worry about the hard cap, which if you do a sign-and trade, you're subject to the hard cap. So it actually creates some more options for Kyrie to be signed and traded. Now, teams will have to match that $37 million figure, whereas it could have been potentially smaller than that if he had opted out. But there's less rules in place about what he can be dealt for and who he can be dealt to. Kyrie could also be extended by the Nets on something lower than the max, and that would put the kibosh on this whole thing. But I think the thing to keep an eye on is what reporting comes out of Kevin Durant's camp next, because that's the one thing we haven't heard. Because this broke so late on the East Coast, it was basically nighttime already on the East Coast by the time Kyrie reportedly chose to opt in. We haven't heard anything about Kevin Durant. So yes, Kyrie's coming back. You would think the default would be those two guys plus Ben Simmons plus whatever they can get in free agency. Joe Harris will be back. They probably feel like, hey, we have a pretty darn good chance of making a run at this thing. The Nets were one win from the conference finals against Milwaukee last summer in 2021 with a hampered James Hamstring. Wow. Freudian slip. James Harden and Kevin Durant at his absolute apex, and basically the same role players they currently have, except no Ben Simmons. So if Ben Simmons can look something like himself and Kyrie Irving can be healthy, maybe they feel like, okay, there we go. That's our team, and we'll roll into it, and we'll try to win a championship together, just like we thought we would do back in 2019 when we came here. I think the timing is also interesting here. So if we don't take Kyrie at his reported word, which is that he's going to opt in, and he did provide a statement about opting in. So it's not like it's just reporting. He gave Shams Charania a statement about doing the daring, unprecedented thing. I don't understand how making a bunch of money that makes you completely unrelatable to most normal people is something daring or anything. I'm not sure there, but that aside, it doesn't really matter what I think about that. He has put it out there, but if we don't take him at his word, or at least understand that there's still some flexibility, he could change his mind in the next 2 days. The opt-in deadline itself, when he would actually have to do the real legitimate official thing of signing paperwork and all that, that's not till the 29th. So he has time there. This is not binding. Whatever he told Shams or whatever he puts in a statement, it's not something that the NBA treats as gold. He has to put it in writing, and that can change. Teams also now still have those 2 days to prep trade offers. So again, maybe only having him for 1 year makes some teams interested that weren't on a longer contract. If this was going to be a sign and trade where Kyrie wanted a 3-year, $90 million deal on this sign and trade, maybe there are teams who are like, no, thank you. But if it's on 1 year, maybe there's teams that are more willing to take a flyer. Maybe the Mavericks, maybe I don't know who. Mystery Team X is a little bit more comfortable taking that risk if it doesn't mean that they're tied to him for a long time. And I just wouldn't rule out that there would be a trade. But no matter what, Suns fans' dreams of getting Kevin Durant to come back to KD and his aspect of this, I just think that the idea that anybody's getting Kevin Durant, especially the Suns, or not especially, but because we all were so aggressively believing it could happen, I think it hits a little bit harder for Suns fans. I just think that's less legitimate. There's less substantive basis to go off of. If you still feel like they're getting KD, you're probably dreaming a little bit more. But as before, it felt like a legitimately real possibility. I think KD's preference, as indicated by the fact that he signed a 4-year extension just last year, is to stay there. He went there in the first place. He finally got to be a, no title chasing, no anything, good free agent, and he chose to go there with Kyrie. That's still probably what he would like to do, and this gives him the opportunity to do it for at least one more season. I just don't think it's all that likely that KD moves teams, but as we've seen with this story and the NBA in general, things are insane and could be very different by the next time I record. I do not know, but I think it's less. All right, let's get Jay Crowder and Landry Shamet trades. Whether the Suns trade DeAndre Ayton or not, I think that Crowder and Shamet are the other two pieces that could be used in a trade to get some different talent on this roster. So I've mentioned a few in the past, especially with Crowder, but I'll get you a few more. I mean, I have like 20 total trades here. I'll just rifle through them. I'll give you alphabetical order. I'll rank them. I'll do it all. We're going to go through the trade possibilities for those two guys here in just a second. First, today's show brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes, models, and trim packages across the entire car industry, it's impossible to know what you need, get it at the right price, and get it in a timely fashion if you're going to a chain auto parts store or, heaven forbid, car dealership. But anyone with a computer has access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. So save time and money and switch to rockauto.com. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. Not a lot of any sort of company that can say that they've been doing one thing at all for 20 years on the internet. But they have. Rock Auto can save you 30, 50, even 100%. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Here's how it's going to work. Go to rockauto.com right now. Type in the car that you have, scroll down to the part that you need, hit purchase, and it'll be at your door within days. And when you make that purchase, write Locked On in there. How did you hear about us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, and all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, so we've talked ad nauseum about DeAndre Ayton trades. We all know the possibilities there. We'll wait and see if any of them come to pass, or as I've continued to believe more and more, maybe he does just come back here, as crazy as that might sound. But we're setting that aside for today. We have not spent nearly enough time on the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of free agency. What is actually going to be possible for the Suns aside from the DeAndre Ayton thing? We've covered the KD stuff. We've covered the Ayton stuff a ton, but there's a lot more that could be done. So Jay Crowder is on a I want to get the number exactly right. He's on about a $10 million salary on an expiring. It is precisely $10.18 million on the last year of it this upcoming season. Landry Shamet is on a $9.5 million contract this year, $10.25 the following year, and then non-guaranteed the last year, and then a team option in year 4. So let's start with Crowder. I've mentioned several Crowder trades in the past, including Tim Hardaway, Malik Beasley, Alec Burks, Duncan Robinson. Some more expensive guys on contending teams that either want to clear cap space, want to create cap flexibility, or maybe would just prefer a 3-and-D forward like Crowder over their guy. So these deals will be a little bit smaller than that. Okay. And I want to preface it with, I don't love all of these, but I was trying to find teams that could use a little bit more of a defensive identity, are either teams that are trying to win or maybe trying to take a leap forward to begin to win this upcoming season. So either teams that are, coming off of a playoff run or want to make one, basically, and have some cap salaries that can either add up to Crowder or match pretty perfectly. So let's get into it. Atlanta for Kevin Huerter. I think that's actually somewhat fair, although Huerter is on a longer contract. So you might have to, if you're the Suns, add something in there. Or maybe the Hawks like the idea of that flexibility. Chicago for Kobe White, Tony Bradley, and 2 second-round picks. Don't love that. I don't know if Tony Bradley is really quite an NBA player. He hasn't really caught on anywhere or made a really big impact. Kobe White, I think, could be really good, so maybe it is fair. To Cleveland for Cedi Osman and their most recent, the guy they drafted last week, Ochai Agbaji. I don't know if they would trade the guy they just drafted, and Cedi is just kind of like a much worse Jay Crowder. Not nearly as good defensively. Jay Crowder to Denver with Torrey Craig for Will Barton and a second-round pick. I kind of like this one a lot, although the thing is, all 3 players are expiring contracts. So it would really just be shuffling the deck chairs a little bit if I'm the Nuggets. It's basically, do I feel like with Jamal Murray coming back, Michael Porter Jr. coming back, that I don't quite need Will Barton scoring as much, and I can switch that over for Jay Crowder, who could really help my perimeter defense, my overall defensive structure, which is something that they just haven't had since they lost Torrey Craig in the first place. I think this one really makes a lot of sense, and Will Barton could be that secondary scoring option for the Suns off the bench. I think that's a pretty interesting one to me. To Sacramento, Jay Crowder to Sacramento for Justin Holiday and Trey Lyles. That doesn't really seem great. The Suns would have to really love Trey Lyles as sort of a forward buy low, not really buy low, like a guy that they could turn into something. Or Jay Crowder to Sacramento for Rashawn Holmes if DeAndre Ayton were to leave. So a few of these are going to be an if Ayton leaves, and this would be one of them. Rashawn Holmes, we all know who he is. I think he fits with what the Suns want to do. He's not quite the same high IQ, heady offensive player that DeAndre Ayton has become, but in terms of playmaking, pick and roll game, short roll stuff, but he is an athlete. He could fulfill that JaVale McGee type of role, but at a higher level. Last but not least, Jay Crowder to Utah for Jordan Clarkson. And this one could even just be straight up. I think Utah clearly needs to get better defensively. They need role players who can defend on the perimeter. They've had Jay Crowder in the building before. Jordan Clarkson doesn't seem to fit what they how they would want the roster to look going forward as they do transition from, hey, let's have everybody be an offense first guy and then Rudy can clean everything up. If you go forward with a starting lineup of mystery center X plus Mitchell, Conley, Bogdanovich, and I guess Crowder would come off the bench, or maybe Conley comes off the bench. Maybe Conley's not on the team, but I just think Crowder would be a nice piece for them. And the Suns could use Jordan Clarkson. I'm actually not convinced Clarkson's not a playoff player either. I think he has this rap as being such a negative on defense, and I think that's fine. But we've seen guys who, if they're good enough on offense, they can survive in the NBA playoffs. And we're only talking about a player who would need to survive in that role for 10 to 15 minutes a game to help Chris Paul or Devin Booker get a little bit of rest and not have to do so much in every single moment of a playoff game. I think that deal makes some sense. Maybe Utah throws in a pick, but I don't even know. I think you really could just do it straight up. All right, Landry Shamet trades. The teams will not be surprising. There's teams that have flexibility in the NBA and there's teams that don't. And there's also teams that are trying to win and teams that aren't. And so if you're going through teams that are trying to win and would want to bring in a player like a Shamet or a Crowder who are really just role players, they have to have the salaries to send back and they have to be wanting to win games. So you'll hear similar teams here, but the players, I try to keep them as separate as possible because I do think you're looking at different things here. So two different ones for Landry Shamet to Cleveland. So one is to Cleveland with Torrey Craig for Lauri Markkanen and Lauri Markkanen. I think that this one is just, you're getting a better player. I just think Lauri Markkanen is a better player than the combination of Shamet and Craig. Shamet and Craig were two guys who were barely in your rotation by the end of the playoffs. Would Lauri Markkanen be in your rotation? I don't know if he can cut it defensively, but I just think if you're getting rid of potentially losing Crowder, etc., you get another forward in there. Problem is, Markkanen's on a pretty long contract. I think he has 3 more years left. That's pretty long. Landry Shamet to Cleveland for Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade. This might be my favorite one. It just depends on if the Cavs, how highly the Cavs value Okoro. I think Wade is somewhat of that. He's not going to play center in the same way that Dario Saric is, but that same kind of ball moving, floor spacing, connector type of guy like a Dario Saric, Dean Wade. Isaac Okoro was he was a top 5 pick recently, but it just doesn't quite feel like his offensive game has come along enough. I don't think you can bail on a player like that after 2 years. But you just look, his rookie season, he played 32.4 minutes per game. His second season, when they were making a playoff push, he was down to 29.6. His stats were down almost across the board, not significantly. His shot did move a little bit forward and from both the free throw line and from deep. So maybe that's enough progress that just giving up on him for Landry Shamet would feel crazy. I think the Suns should be willing to throw in picks or different things, Aaron Holiday, whatever. I don't know. I don't know if it's able to get done for a guy who was just recently a first-round pick. But if that was possible, I would love that a lot. Here's another if Ayton leaves one to the Landry Shamet to the Dallas Mavericks for Dwight Powell. You can basically do that straight up. To Landry Shamet to Denver, along with a future second-round pick for Monte Morris. This one is kind of, do the Nuggets feel like, again, with Jamal Murray coming back especially, they don't really have, a pure point guard on the roster to back him up if they do lose Morris, but those guys can be pretty easy to find, and they also want to probably get Bones Highland into the rotation a little bit more. So does Bones become kind of your third guard, and you have Landry Shamet there as more of a shooter rather than being like a point guard as Morris has been, because they also have Austin Rivers still, and they're probably going to be pretty aggressive making moves this upcoming season. I believe that they drafted a pretty long shot guy at number 30, so maybe not him, but I think that could make some sense. Just shuffle the deck a little bit, get a pick, and have Shamet be a shooter that can play around Nikola Jokic. Here's 2 different deals for Landry Shamet to go to the New Orleans Pelicans. One is if Ayton leaves, to package Shamet with Torrey Craig and a future pick or a couple of future second-round picks for Jackson Hayes. Another guy, recent first-round top 10 overall pick, but It's been 3 years, and he just hasn't been getting a lot of minutes. So maybe they're willing to move on him before they have to decide on an extension, and Hayes could become maybe even the starter in Ayton's place. Landry Shamet to New Orleans for Devontae Graham and a future second-round pick. Devontae Graham is on a pretty bad contract. He has 3 more seasons, and it's about the same amount as Shamet, except for it's all guaranteed. So I'm not sure that's the best option, but I just think at the end of the day, you can try. Like, I know that Devontae Graham has one proven skill in the NBA, which is even though he's small, he can get his shot off. He can get his pull-up three going and make you pay. We saw him do it against the Suns in the first round. Landry Shamet doesn't even have one proven skill because his shot is still streaky. He doesn't even have that to fall back on necessarily. So maybe if you can get a future second-round pick if you're the Suns, Devontae Graham just being that spark plug guy, maybe it's just worth exploring. Lastly, to the New York Knicks. Landry Shamet to the New York Knicks with a future second for Nerlens Noel if Deandre Ayton leaves. Now, Noel is probably just a better player than Shamet, which is maybe why the Suns would have to include a pick or two, future second-round pick or two. But I also just think the Knicks don't really have a need for Nerlens Noel. They want Mitchell Robinson to be their starter. You don't need to pay 2 big men necessarily at all in the NBA right now. So I would say on these, the Crowder deal that's my favorite is either the Denver deal or the Utah deal. So if you can get either Will Barton or Jordan Clarkson, I think that sounds really, really good. And then the Cleveland deal, the Shamet deal, I think the Cleveland one, if they were willing to move on from Okoro, that might be kind of insane. And I really kind of like that Denver deal. If you could get Monte Morris, it would allow you to then move Cameron Payne somewhere else, and you just have so much stability at that backup point guard spot. I think that would be really big. He's just been such a key part for the Nuggets for such a long time that it might just be hard for them to stomach that, even if the Suns added some other stuff. But it's hard for me to get a feel on what Shamet's value is. I have a feeling it's probably even lower than I'm guessing. So maybe the Suns' best option is just to bring him back unless they can stack his salary in some sort of bigger contract or bigger deal, bigger trade. If they don't, then I just think straight up you're probably not getting a ton for him. So it might not be worth trying. It might just be, hey, let's see if 2 straight seasons in one place might just be what Landry Shamet needs, because he's basically never had that in his NBA career. We'll close out with big men targets. I'll also just tell you what I think the Suns ought to do in terms of the centers they already have on the roster or who are free agents on their roster right now. First, today's show brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting needs and info all year long, including the baseball playoffs. You have Wimbledon, or the baseball regular season. You have Wimbledon coming up. You have NBA destination odds, which is what I'm about to look up. Unfortunately, I do think most places took down the Deandre Ayton landing spot odds. But in addition to betting odds, you have sports wagering info like live betting, the latest scores, news, analysis, podcasts, all of it to make sure that you're getting the information that you need to make the smartest bets that you can. Let's look. Do they have destination odds for any player in the NBA right now? Or is it just too crazy out there to even guess? NBA specials. It's all the Lakers. People love to bet the Lakers, and BetOnline just knows what it is. Lakers finishing over or under 6th in the West. I kind of like that. You have NBA championship odds for next year, which I've been telling you guys about. The Suns are plus 1,200, which is 6th. That feels like not bad value there to just get in on a team that seems very undervalued right now. So head to the website today, that's betonline.net, or use their mobile app to learn more about the latest trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so the Suns have 4 big men on the roster right now. They cut Frank Kaminsky, so it was 5. It's 3 now. It's 4 now. So obviously DeAndre Ayton, we've talked all about what the options are with him. And obviously everything starts with him. If the Suns bring him back, it doesn't really matter a whole ton which of the big men that they bring back, as long as they do have a capable backup. Beneath that, here's where I see things going. So James Jones mentioned last week during his post-draft press conference that Dario Saric is likely to be back. I think that makes a ton of sense. He's on an expiring contract, so you could still trade him at the trade deadline next year. And he just doesn't have, I can't imagine, much value right now. He is a player who's coming off of a torn ACL and a torn meniscus, although I think the meniscus tear was pretty minor. And he fits for the Suns, so you might as well not sell at the absolute basement on him. You probably have to give up an asset to get off of him right now, and it's not worth it because you're not getting cap space out of that anyway. So it just makes sense. Bring him back. and see if he can fill what was a really valuable role for you when he was healthy. JaVale McGee, coming off of what I think is fair to call an overpay now, although it made a ton of sense to do it. And it's not like the Suns lost out on anybody we all thought they were going to get because they paid JaVale McGee. But I think at this point, you offer JaVale McGee a minimum or you let him go. You just don't need to invest another $5 million at the center spot with everything else that you're trying to do. Last but not least, if Bismack Biyombo wants to come back and is okay playing on a minimum contract again, which I can't imagine another team would be wanting to give him more than that, then I think he should actually be a pretty high priority. I mean, we saw even as late as the second round, deep into that series, I still felt like Bismack was making a nice impact, switching out onto Luka, playing with good energy, rebounding, etc. So, I mean, there's a version of this where the Suns keep Ayton and just re-sign Biyombo and keep Saric as those are their three centers. Those are kind of their three bigs, and then they have their forwards and they mix and match and they're good to go. But if they lose Ayton and trade Ayton for maybe somebody who's not a center, or they let McGee and Biyombo both go and they want another option there because you can't just say Saric is your guy. He's not – you have no idea if he's going to be able to stay on the floor or recover enough to make an impact starting on opening night. So if any of that happens, you need to look at the free agent market. Here are my top 6 options for the Suns in order. I went ahead and ranked them. Number 1, Isaiah Hartenstein. He is only 24 years old if you've been keeping track of his career at all. He started with the Clippers, then he was on the Nuggets, or maybe it was vice versa. He is a player who I've just never – I mean, he's like one of those, NBA nerd guys who everybody always seems to mention, oh, you could get great value for Hartenstein. I still think that that's true, though, because this past season he got actual playing time, and he really proved what makes him a pretty special player. He's a playmaking defender who's 7 feet tall and maybe could shoot one day. He started to shoot more this year, but I don't know if you can necessarily trust it. He didn't take a ton of shots. But I mean, a guy who's 24 years old who already can move the ball at a high level and defend at a high level with 7 feet size and could maybe shoot for you. I don't know why you wouldn't bet on that. And he's probably not going to be that expensive because he is still pretty unproven. Number 2, Naz Reid, 22-year-old. He does the Timberwolves have a team option on him, and I think it actually would, well, if they decline the team option, I guess he wouldn't become a restricted free agent. He would become an unrestricted free agent. I don't necessarily know why they wouldn't just go ahead and keep him, but there is a possibility that he becomes available. I just want to mention him. Maybe they just do other stuff. They just drafted another big man, Walker Kessler, in the first round, and they seem to still have their eyes on like a Rudy Gobert or something. So I don't know why they want a center. I don't know why they want to play Towns at the 4. That's a little interesting to me, but Naz Reid could become available. He's a bruiser, floor spacer with a good motor. And I think his defense, because he's not a great athlete, you kind of think his defense is bad, but as a third big man on your team with Saric and Ayton or something, I don't think it's terrible. Or if he's probably not the high-level guy you would want to have starting, I guess, but because he has a little bit of a question mark on defense. But I think Hartenstein could be a starter for you, and I think this number 3 guy could be a starter for you. Yusuf Nurkic, 27 years old. We all know who Yusuf Nurkic is. Good ball mover, good rebounder who can score in the post if you need him to, and he can defend pretty well in a drop coverage. Is he a great athlete? No. Has he come off of injury now? Yes, but still theoretically in his physical prime, plays with amazing energy, great rebounder, and he's played in that Terry Stotts system with the Portland Trailblazers where he's making plays in the short roll, he's in dribble handoffs, he's ball reversals at the top of the key. Like he's been used in so many ways that I just think you can plug him in. I just think the reason he's number 3 for me is that he might get the full mid-level exception. He might be a pretty pricey player. Number 4, Ivica Zubac. He's only 25, which doesn't even feel possible. He's one of those European players who gets drafted when they actually are really young, even though we think of most of those Euros as being older when they come over. So he's a guy who got drafted by and then traded by Magic Johnson all those years ago with the Lakers, and he's only 25. I just think he's sort of like a bruiser who can move. Like he's a little bit more athletic and nimble than you would guess, but mostly he's going to be a rebounder. He's going to be a physical rim protector, guy who's going to, step up and take a charge, make you second guess your layup attempt, but nothing spectacular, but just really, really solid. And I think he could actually get the full mid-level too, because he's coming off making $8 million. The mid-level is about 10. So him being in the prime of his career, maybe he can convince a team, hey, I'm still going to get better. I'm only 25. Give me the full mid-level. Not maybe for 4 years, but like for 2. And you could do a lot worse. Number 5, Mo Bamba, 24 years old. We know who Mo Bamba is. Floor spacer, rim protector, pretty unique unicorn type of player, but very unproven. This past year with Orlando was really the only good season that he's had in his career where he actually made shots, actually stayed on the floor, actually protected the rim. He had a nasty spell with COVID, so it's not his fault by any means, but he seems to be making good on his promise. Now, he is a restricted free agent, and he's not really the type of player that the Suns have gravitated toward. They've been pretty traditional with their big men. Now, I know Dario Saric isn't a traditional 5, but as a 4, he's very traditional. He's Ryan Anderson, but better, right? Or whatever you want to say. So a guy who's a 5, who's like a legit 7 feet tall, who plays behind the arc. I don't know if that's what Monty Williams wants, but I think every team should be thinking about Mo Bamba as a restricted free agent, especially if Orlando just decides to move on, if other things come up and they just don't show an interest in signing Bamba. I mean, 24 and that type of talent, it'd be dumb not to look at it. Last but not least, number 6, Mike Muscala. I don't think he is going to change your franchise by any means, but he's a floor spacer with size. Like there's no other real way about it. He would be sort of your Frank Kaminsky replacement, but probably even a little worse than that. He has a team option. He's basically been in Oklahoma City forever, been getting overpaid by them for the past few years, I think, because they don't have anywhere else to put their money. But again, he's my number 6 here, and I probably would even put JaVale and Biyombo both ahead of him. But the bottom line is he's not a bad option. He can space the floor for you, and if you put him out there with Cameron Payne or something, and he's able to space the floor, give Payne a driving lane, make his threes, keep the defense honest, and at least give you the size. I don't know if he's really going to do much for you in terms of rebounding or any of that, but he's not a bad player. He's not going to crumble. He's not a playoff player, but he can get you some minutes. So he would close us out. Again, a minimum guy, not somebody that's going to cost a lot. So why not? That'll do it. We've gone through bench scorers. We've gone through trades for Crowder, trades for Shamet, KD and Ayton, all of it, and now big men. So I imagine tomorrow I will get back to the Ayton stuff. There might be more KD stuff, but I've basically given you guys like 50 names, 100 names across the NBA that the Suns could either get in a trade or in free agency. I hope this is food for thought as we get toward Thursday, and we'll just monitor the news as we go. Big thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen today. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to keep up with everything else going on around the association.